If you're a junior or a senior undergraduate student, not that you have to be to listen to this episode, but if you're one of those two, then I bet I could name a big question that's been weighing on your mind. The question is, should I go to graduate school, and how do I get in? Am I right? I mean, really, there's just so much information out there about choosing graduate schools, so much that it's hard to know where to start. For example, how many hours should you spend in preparation for graduate school? How much time should you set aside? What tasks should you do ahead of time in order to boost your chances of acceptance? How much will graduate school cost? What jobs will be available once you get your degree, and how much money will you make? Okay, I'm starting to wear myself out of bed, and probably you too. So now that we've established the true enormity of going to graduate school, how about instead, I just give you a super cheesy one-liner that conveniently segues into our favorite podcast theme song. What do you say? One does not simply walk into graduate school. Hello, this is Boromir. Okay, obviously not. This is Bradley, and I've got to admit I'm starting to have a lot of fun working on these episodes. So, yeah, you're listening to the Psych Everywhere podcast, which is brought to you by Psi Chi Honor Society in Psychology. For this episode, we've invited Dr. Betsy Morgan to give you the scoop on choosing graduate school programs. Dr. Morgan has a long history of helping students learn how to get into graduate school. And as it so happens, she wrote a Psi Chi Journal editorial a year or so back about whether you should take the GRE, which I think you'd probably enjoy. It's called the GRE Psychology Subject Test, Advising Implications of a Faded Criterion for Graduate Admission. So, when we were choosing speakers for this season of the podcast, Dr. Regan Goering and I both felt that Dr. Morgan would be a perfect person to give a sort of big picture overview of how to choose graduate schools. Having listened ahead, because I like to do that, I think she did a really great job of laying out the answers to many of those big questions that you probably have about grad school. In this episode, get ready for the tools to help you determine whether graduate school is right for you. You'll also find out what to look for in programs and your chances of being accepted. Are you ready? Okay, I have just one last thing. It would probably be a good idea to keep a pencil and a sheet of paper somewhere handy for this one, unless you're driving to school, obviously. But yeah, be ready to jot down some notes because there's going to be a lot of information that you're going to want to remember during your journey to graduate school. All right, I'll let Dr. Morgan take the wheel from here.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Psi Chi podcast regarding graduate school. Today we're going to talk about what to consider before you apply, whether you should go to graduate school, and the application process. The focus of today's podcast is psychology majors and related fields such as social science majors, and the topic is on graduate school related to psychology majors. We know that many students go on in fields such as medical school or health professions, but today's topic really has to do with more directly psychology-related graduate school. In my opinion, the single most important thing to find out before you consider applying is whether or not you need an advanced degree to do the type of work you want to do. Now, you can find this out in many ways. The most important is to research the career in which you're interested. But it's also true that working in a field for a while gives you a sense of the types of degrees that the people have around you who are doing the kind of work that you want to do. Let's talk about reasons why you might want to go to graduate school. Here are some great reasons. That you are passionate about a particular topic or area. If you're thinking about doctoral programs or master's degrees in content areas outside of licensure, you need to enjoy research. You need to enjoy being a student and reading and thinking deeply about topics. And you might want to allow for higher career advancement. This is related to the topic that we started earlier, which is, do you need a degree to do what you want to do? A similar question is, will a degree help you advance in the field in which you're interested? Another question is, do I want to make more money? Let's come back to the money question later on. The reality is that in some human services fields, an advanced degree may not help you make much more money than if you had gone into a different field. But within human services, an advanced degree is often the right way to go. Here are some reasons not to go to graduate school. You should not go to please anybody else. You should not go because you don't know what else to do after you graduate with an undergraduate degree. You should not go to avoid paying off student loans, even though we know that's very appealing, but again, you want to be going for the right reasons. Another reason to not go to graduate school is just because you're smart. I know that sounds funny. Being smart really helps, but you need the persistence and the passion to get a graduate degree. And so wait to make sure it's the right thing for you. Speaking of waiting, let's talk about why you might want to delay going to graduate school right after undergraduate degree. People around you might say, oh, you got to go right straight through or you'll never go back. We have not found that to be true. It may be true that 10 years later, it's harder because people often have partners or children or other things. But a couple of years after college where you work in a field and think more broadly about what you'd like to do, that is often makes for a better decision as well as makes you a stronger candidate. I will say that it's important to spend those years working in the field, even if you're working as a server to pay the bills, but you're volunteering at a local organization, something that keeps your finger in the idea of the type of experiences that you want to have. Can you volunteer for research? Can you do an internship? All of those things that help expand your repertoire. Reasons why you might want to go right after undergraduate is you tend to be in the mode of being a student, and that's good. And your memory on the material that you've covered is fresher. And maybe you already know that's the career you want and you're committed. Reasons to wait is you need more time to figure it out. You're burned out on school. It happens. You can work and save some money. You have other life obligations. And one that people don't talk enough about is that your workplace may help you pay for it. Many, many places will provide some sort of employee assistance for graduate work. They might not pay for the whole thing, but maybe they give you hours toward attending courses, or they'll pay a fraction of tuition. Oftentimes that comes with some guarantee, for instance, that you'd work for the company for 6 months to a year afterwards, or it's just part of them investing in their employees and providing opportunities. What do you need to consider before applying for graduate school? The single biggest issue is what type of program you're going to attend. Here we're really talking about the subfields, so let's break it down a little bit. Again, we originally said today we're going to talk about fields associated with psychology. So let's assume that you're not going to go to a professional school like law school or a health profession like medical school or occupational or physical therapy. Let's stay within the general realm of psychology. As you well know, the big difference in psychology tends to be around the notion of what I would say are the therapy-related fields and then the more research-related fields. And of course, in clinical psychology and counseling and school psychology, they all have a research component. But do you want to be doing some kind of one-to-one human services type of interactions? The key to human services fields, and in APA language, what we're talking about is clinical counseling school in terms of doctorate level. The key really is licensure. If you're going to work in any state in the U.S., you will need to be licensed as a mental health professional of some sort. And the language changes, but we're still talking about a mental health professional, a type of therapy, kinds of relationships. Now, I want to make it clear here that it does not have to be an APA accredited doctoral program. At the master's level, there are many options. And one of the things that we don't talk to students enough about is a master's in social work. Many masters in social work really train students to do one-on-one type therapy, as well as understand the context of people's lives. The reason why an MSW tends to be a very good degree for many of our students is that licensure carries across state lines. For any type of clinical counseling, school therapy, you do want to talk to somebody in your staff or somebody who's practicing to understand what the licensure needs are in the state. Let's take a minute on accreditation also. You want to go to an accredited school. If you're going on in clinical counseling or school doctoral level programs, you want to be in an APA accredited school. Again, with master's degrees, it doesn't tend to be APA who accredits them. It tends to be more regional or statewide organizations. For a master's degree or an EDD in school psychology, you might be looking at NASP, the National Association of School Psychology accreditation. But you should be asking those questions. And the questions really are, how do I know this is a high quality school? Is there an accrediting body? Who is that accrediting body? It's a weird subfield that a lot of students don't know a lot about, and we don't expect you to, but it is important to say, was the curriculum, are the experiences designed to make sure that you're getting the optimal education in that area? Also, in terms of licensure, you should be looking at how they help you attain the clinical hours you would need to apply toward licensure. Do they tend to be paid or unpaid situations? Those are very specific questions to clinical type programs that we won't go into in depth today. Then when we're talking about other kinds of fields, then you're talking about things like a social psychology or developmental or industrial organizational. Those are the kinds of fields that you might also be interested in going into. And of course, then you make the decisions between a master's and a doctorate. And we will come back to that topic in just a minute. As you're looking into schools, take a look at the faculty. One great way to think about doctoral level programs is to see where the people are that you enjoy their research. You think this is a topic that fascinated me. I really enjoyed reading about that. Where is that person? Who's done research with that person? Where are they located? You need to also think, of course, about costs and resources. And one of the things in addition to the cost is what kinds of help do they provide their graduate students? What percentage of their graduate students get some form of aid? Either we're talking about grants, we're talking about scholarships, we're talking about access to graduate assistantships or teaching assistantships. Can they guarantee something? Many of those options won't be clear until you've been accepted and if they provide some sort of an offer, but it's appropriate to have a general understanding of the kinds of support provided to the students prior to applying. You should think about location. Are you able to move? You need to think about the reputation of the program, and again, accreditation is a big piece of that. And you need to think about the admission criteria. You know, if they are accepting, in general, people with 3.5 GPAs and GREs of a certain level, then, and you aren't close to either one, is that really going to be worthy for you to apply? Is that worth your time? So those are the initial things to think about when you want to apply.
You're listening to Psych Everywhere. Up next, find out about acceptance rates in graduate school programs, and a lot more. But first, real quick, let me take a minute to more properly introduce you to Dr. Morgan. Betsy Morgan, PhD, received a doctorate in social ecology, social and gender psychology from the University of California, Irvine. She is a fellow of the American Psychological Association, served as a Psi Chi chapter advisor for over 15 years, and as the president of the Psi Chi International Honor Society for the 2014-15 term. She is the author of several peer-reviewed publications, as well as 2 textbooks, and has made over 50 conference presentations. Her book with co-author Ian Korskin, Majoring in Psychology, Career Options for Psychology Undergraduates, went to 5 editions. She has advised hundreds of students over 2 decades in higher education and is proud of their accomplishments. She has lost count of the number of times she has discussed graduate school options with individuals or groups of students. She currently serves as the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, where she misses getting to have daily interactions with students.
Let's talk a little bit about acceptance rates and what to look at. First of all, There's excellent research that suggests that master's degrees level programs, as compared to doctoral levels, are in fact easier to get into. None of them are easy to get into. It is easier. If you look over all subfields in psychology, the general acceptance rates in the master's programs is about 50%. The general into doctoral programs is about 14%. So that has to go into your criteria as you think about to whom you might apply and also what your chances are of getting in. One of the things that you'll see from most programs is they will tell you what the minimum GPA is and then what the actual GPA is of the people they accepted. You should pay a lot of attention to that number. Almost always the minimal is a 3.0. But oftentimes what you'll see is a minimum of a 3.0 in a master's and maybe a 3.2 in doctoral. But if you look at their actuals, it's a 3.4 for master's and a 3.56 for doctoral. So that information again goes into how competitive of an applicant am I going to be? And if I don't fit that criteria, what can I do? I'm going to take a little sub-trip here and talk to you about GPAs. GPAs are very important. They're an indicator of how well you did in school and how well you might do in graduate school. If you do not meet the minimum, I do not recommend applying. In fact, I think what you need to do is figure out how to strengthen your portfolio prior to applying. And you can talk to that school, you can talk to your faculty, but don't just think, oh, 2.6 is close enough to 3.0. Most programs get plenty of applications and they will what we call paper screen. That is, they'll just say, I don't even need to take the time to read this because I have all these people who have a 3.0 or above. And that's a reasonable decision on the terms of the graduate school. For you, you might say, yeah, but I have all these reasons why my GPA wasn't as high, but that's a different situation. A couple of things that you might think about are taking 1 or 2 graduate classes at a local school close to you or one potentially online and showing that you can do graduate level work. I think this is where you really need to be looking at applied experiences. I've worked in the field. I have letters from people to say I know I can be successful. But the academic component will always be important to graduate school. That's why they look at letters of recommendation. They want people who have been through graduate school to be able to say that you will be successful in graduate school because you know what it takes. So let's talk about how many schools to apply to. In general, we recommend about 3 to 7. First of all, they're expensive. Second of all, is there a reason to go much beyond that? We don't have any good evidence to suggest that you should, and you need to be thinking about your interests, the fit, the cost, and the type of school. I never recommend applying to a school that you would not attend. I mean, we can talk about you have your A-list schools, the ones that you know, the reach schools, the ones you'd really like to go to, the B, I would go there, it's a good school, I'd be happy to go there. And then you say, well, there's a C school. Well, I'll apply that in case I can't get in any of the other ones. If you would not attend, even if you don't get into the other ones, don't apply. It's not worth your time and effort. It's not worth their time and effort. How do you find graduate schools? There's still a lot of good places. Petersons.com, gradschools.com. You know, there's APA lists of accredited school. There's the Psychology Graduate School Wiki. There are really many ways to find out. And of course, use your networks of people to say, what might you recommend? What will you need? You will need transcripts, test scores, resumes, personal statements, references, and recommendations. Graduate school criteria is usually discussed in 2 ways, the objective criteria and the more subjective criteria. Both are important. When we talk about objective criteria, we are mostly talking about your GPA and then some form of national testing. Now, a lot of schools have dropped the national testing, but you need to know whether that's going to be part of your application process. I have known students who have only applied to schools that don't require a GRE because they don't want to take the GRE. I think that is overly limiting. It is an additional piece of information for the school. It won't necessarily make you or break you. What I normally tell students is, really good GRE scores will help you. Really horrible GRE scores will hurt you, and everything else is in the middle. It's yet another piece of information. We've already discussed GPAs, and then let's talk again about GREs for a minute. There's very few schools who still require the psychology-specific GRE, the content test in psychology. So do not take that unless you know that the school you're interested in wants a score. Occasionally, we recommend the Psych GRE if you are an international student or a student who didn't have an undergraduate degree in psychology. It's a way to show that you understand the content associated with the field. But again, don't just think, oh, I have to take that. For the GRE, what we know is it matters if you study. You need to get used to the format of the GRE, the timing of the GRE. There are excellent books and CDs and online tests and all those things that help you get ready for that test, and it's worth you investing some time in learning how to do it better. Students often ask me if it's worth it to take a GRE prep course. They are often expensive, so if you can afford it, they're probably a pretty good kick in the rear and they help you stay on target. If your school offers one that's reasonable, I would recommend it to you. But in general, if you're someone who's disciplined enough, and that type of discipline, by the way, will help you in graduate school, but if you're disciplined enough to actually study for the GRE, to take the practice exams, then I would say do it on your own. Let's talk now about subjective criteria. We're going to talk about letters of recommendation, personal statements, potentially an interview, and then other forms of information that you might be able to provide to the school. In terms of letters of recommendation, they matter. Again, the school is looking to say, does someone know this person well enough to be able to indicate whether or not they'll be successful in school? If you have any chance to do this, depending on the size of the school that you're attending or did attend, if you could take more than one class with the same professor, that really makes for a stronger letter. If a faculty member says to you, I don't know you well enough to write you a letter, you should pay attention to that. And as Drew Appleby, who's sort of famous in this field, says, you should always ask not, will you write me a letter of recommendation? Will you write me a good letter of recommendation? It really is crucial to your application to say this needs to really say this person is a really good student. Whatever your faculty member asks for you to provide, do it and provide it in a timely manner. It makes us very grumpy when students say, oh, in 24 hours this is due, and many of us will not turn it around that quickly. Most of us require at least 2 weeks in advance and some more than that. You need to have all your materials organized. You need lists of to whom they're going, whether it requires an additional form, if it's all online, all of those things need to be crystal clear. One question that comes up is, do you get a letter of recommendation because you might apply in a couple of years? Almost all of us will say, we really don't want to take the time, and it's time intensive to write a good letter, until we know you're going to go and you're going to know what type of school. So I think what's important there is to tell your faculty member you might be interested in going. And then here's the kick. You really need to keep in touch. Every 6 months, say, hey, I'm doing this. I write them an email. I'm thinking about this now. But stay in touch so at the time that you reach out to them for a letter, they know what you've been doing. You'll provide them your resume and all will be good. Let's talk about personal statements. So personal statements. There's excellent research out there about do's and don'ts. I'll give you a couple of them. In general, you don't want to write a very general essay, the one that everybody is writing. But you also don't want to say silly things like, since the moment I was born, I knew I wanted to be a counselor, or I want to help people. These end up being cliches. Your job with a personal essay is to really indicate who you are as a person. Think of it as a database. You're making an argument. I could be a successful student. I want to be an industrial organizational psychologist. Now, what data do you pull from your life to help support that argument? Here's the examples of how I am a good student. Here's an example of why it is I know industrial organizational psych is a good fit for me. You want to focus on the positives. You want to not send an essay addressed to Yale University if you're actually interested in Harvard. You don't want to gush about the school, but you do want to show that you did your research, that that's the right fit for you. You want to make a connection, be clear, concise, and remember that you're looking for a way to stand out in a field. They're reading a lot of these, so make sure it is a strong personal statement. you must have other people proofread it. Do not write it at midnight and submit it at 12:01 and think it's going to be good. It needs to go through several iterations. It needs to be error-free, and it needs to have impact. One question that often comes up is whether or not you should mention your own trials and tribulations, in particular the issue of mental health. Generally speaking, we do not recommend that unless you are way on the far side of being able to talk about it in a way that's salient. We have had students who have dealt with it in their own families and their own personal, but the general idea here is that's only going to be crucial to your essay if you can make a very clear argument about why it is that enhances your application for graduate school. If it is a school that has interviews, make sure you do your homework. You really need to know about that school. What are they interested in? What are they doing? Their website will tell you a lot. You should look into their faculty. You might ask them for some names of current graduate students to whom you could speak. You want to express your enthusiasm. You want to ask good questions. You want to be confident but not arrogant. You want to dress professionally. I have a friend who always calls it corporate culture, not club culture. You don't have to dress to go out on the town. You want to look like you're a young professional or an older professional, but a professional. And again, you want to talk to current students while you're there. In terms of some of your experiences as a student or as a person of the world, here are some things that really make for good highlighting. It depends on whether you highlight them in your essay or in some other form of the application materials, but these are the things we're going to be looking for. We're always looking for research experience. Even if it's not a research program, what we know is the process of doing research is excellent for helping with critical thinking. So you want to talk about your research experience. Have you been an RA? Have you done independent research? Was there a McNair program at your school? If you hadn't done any independent research, talk about the research you might have done as part of coursework. You want to talk about any relevant work or internship experiences. Did you volunteer somewhere? Doesn't matter whether it was paid or unpaid. Doesn't matter if it's credit or non-credit. It's a relative working experience. Have you been in any leadership positions? And then it's less psychology specific. Maybe you were a leader in a sports team. Maybe you're a leader in a student club. Those are always appealing. And of course, if you've had any study abroad experiences or experiences within the U.S. that show that you have a wide range of culturally relevant experiences. And then, of course, any other thing that you've done that shaped your particular interest in graduate school. Let's talk a little bit about common reasons for non-admission. Common reasons for non-admission are not meeting the deadline. That's crucial. You really need to get those materials in time. An incomplete application, a failure to meet the minimum requirements, you're just not a good fit for the program. You know, if they say this is a program in social psych associated with social justice and intersectionality, and you say, I've always wanted to be an industrial organizational psychologist, it's not going to be a good fit. And sometimes it's just too competitive. It is, you actually would be able to get in, but there are so many students that at some point, you know, the criteria is that they had more spaces, they would have given you a space. For doctoral programs, oftentimes that means a one-on-one match with the faculty member. So we'll conclude with, where do you go for more help? First of all, your faculty really are your first line of information. They've been to graduate school. They understand what it takes to get in and to thrive. Your own career services, they might call it something different at your school, but they will go through mock interviews with you. They will review your resume. They will often read your statement of intent. Those are crucial resources to take advantage of. Finally, I really encourage you to access the resources of Psi Chi. Over the years, they've produced many fine articles regarding graduate school, and they're written by the top names in the field. As you think about graduate school, here's something you may not have recognized. Although it's challenging to be a psychology major because there's more competition, there's so many psychology majors. But in this one condition, that has led to the development of some really great material regarding graduate school, how to think about it, how to prepare, and how to choose among the various subdisciplines. I wish you the very best of luck and the best of skill as you think about these next steps. I hope this was helpful. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Psych Everywhere. Do you feel one step closer to choosing the graduate school program that's right for you? You know, I bet you do. And if so, please do us a quick favor. Take 2 minutes to leave a review at Apple Podcast. To leave a review, simply search for Psych Everywhere, which is one word, and then scroll to the reviews section. Before we part ways, I want to provide you with some additional information about graduate school. As it so happens, Psi Chi, which is the publisher of this podcast, has a special online resource to help you go to graduate school. This free resource will help you determine if graduate school is right for you, and then it will help you organize your personal statement, obtain letters of recommendation, write your CV, and ace the interview process. To access it, simply visit www.psichi.org/res_graduate school. A little slower. That's www.psichi.org/res_graduate school. In the sidebar of this resource, you'll also find a link to Psi Chi's ebook, An Eye on Graduate School, Guidance Through a Successful Application. This digital anthology brings together our very best advice about applying to graduate school. That's advice accumulated from 25 plus experts across over 20 plus years of Eye on Psi Chi magazine issues. Currently, the book only costs $4.99 to Psi Chi members, or $19.95 to non-members. Many chapters in the book have been updated so that they contain the latest information all in a single location. Special versions for Kindle or other online readers are available. So, in all honesty, I think it's probably the best $4.99 or $19.95 that you could spend to get on track to attend graduate school. But then again, I'm one of the co-editors on that book, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. Anyway, I just want to point you out to those two special opportunities. That's all for now. Talk to you again. You guessed it, soon. Copyright 2020. Psi Chi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. All rights reserved.